Hello, welcome back to Marty's Bench. Tonight I'm tying a Platte River spider. It's a Chris Schranz pattern. You see great step-by-step instructions on Charlie's Flybox website. But the only change I've made on this is the original I think was tied on a 200R, and I just love tying these things on salmon fly hooks. They're light wire, they're very sharp, they look cool. And kind of the idea of this pattern is it's fished as a trailing streamer, but it's nice and light, so you can fish it with a 5-weight or even a 4-weight. You don't have to always go back for the big guns. Now this thing is tied with kind of melded marabou. And when you pick marabou feathers, clean them up good and take a look. You see the one on the right there is a nice thin stem, and the other one's pretty thick. You're going to have a lot easier time wrapping the one with the thinner stem. You want to get a feather with kind of longer, straight tips. If it's fluffy all the way out to the end, your end result just won't look right. So what you want to do is you want to get a brown one and a yellow one that are as similar as you can get them. And I match them up so that the tips are the same length out to the end. And then I'm going to try and reach in there and clean it off and get to the very stem. And it looks like on this one I'm going to need to do it one at a time. Stroke all those fibers away. Going to do the same on the yellow. And now I'll match them up. And I'm just going to dampen those so that they're a little easier to handle. Now I'm making this wrap not on the bare spot, not on the stem itself, but I'm making it on the part where there are some fibers. I think that makes it a little stronger. You can make your wraps tighter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it back and kind of lock it in with a couple of turns and then move my red thread forward. Now I'm using UTC 70 denier thread. Using a finer thread you'll find is a lot easier because you will make a few extra wraps, but you can use those to shape a nice head on the end. Now I'm going to grab those stems, and this is messy. I'm going to stroke the fibers back and just to the best of my ability I'm going to move them forward without overlapping and keeping those two stems together. And you just kind of tease it out as you go to keep it from binding down individual marabou fibers. And I'm getting out of here towards the end. Still got those two stems together. And just, you can get in there with a bodkin or dubbing brush and just reach in there and pluck out anything that got bound down. And just kind of keep teasing them until the fibers all melt together. Now I can kind of slide that back just a little bit and make those coils sit together and get this nice and tight and neat up at the front. Now the next step here is some mallard flank, and I'm going to do it with dyed wood duck. It's mallard flank dyed wood duck color. And I'm going to prepare by getting down to a part of the stem that's a little stronger. And again, I'm not going to make my thread wraps right on that bare piece of stem. I'm going to make it where there's a number of fibers and then fold it back and lock it into place. And before I start wrapping, I'm going to come in here and get rid of that tip. Now you only need a couple turns of this, but it really does have a function. It helps tame the marabou. And again, I'm going to stroke those fibers to the back. A couple turns is enough. If you go any farther, you'll know you've gone too far because that stem gets pretty thick and pretty hard to wrap. Now I'm going to tie a couple strands of Krystal Flash. This is root beer colored. And I'm just going to put one strand on each side. This is very subtle. And I'm going to make kind of a platform here for the OVERWING. And I don't need to build up very much. I just want something smooth and flat. Now, the original pattern calls for a brown furnace hackle over a yellow. I'm just going to use furnace hackle, and this is an inexpensive Indian neck. Let's see if I can get a couple of feathers that match. There we go. What you're looking for is that dark stripe right down the middle of a brown feather. I've got two of them, and I'm going to match them up so that they're cupped towards each other. And then I'm going to get the tips even. And these have a little bit of a curl to them. I'm just going to wet my finger and stroke those stems together so that they sit right while I tie them in. And then once they get wet in the water, they'll lose that curl. I'm measuring them so that they're about 2/3, 3/4 of the length of the bulk of the marabou. Cut them to length and clean up the stems. And I'm just going to lay those right on the top, right next to each other. You see that? And just hold them in place and get some firmer and firmer wraps. Now I got some space left between my thread and the eye. There's no rule that says you got to use that and put thread on it. So I'm just going to tie the head right back here. And keep it somewhat short. Now I'm going to get some lacquer on it. I'm going to use hardest hull. I've got the thin formula. Yeah, that's pretty. Let's turn it in the vise a few times and let it get started with the set. And it'll firm up pretty quickly. Now the true test is going to be when you get this, see this thing in the water. Obviously it's messy looking on the vise, but those blends of marabou and then the action you get off of all of that is pretty amazing. So there you go, Platte River Spider.